What stops people from being able to have control over their profit? Hi, I am Kayla Swanson, and I'm your host of the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast. And hanging out with me today is Jason Everett. What's up, Jason?
Whoa, man, I'm super stoked to be on talking about profit because I think people should have more of it if they want or less if they choose. And I know that sounds weird to say more or less, but it's going to be a good day talking about it because if you don't have control over it, what's the point of running a business?
No kidding. And I think profit's you get in a business, you obviously want to make a profit. You want to have a profitable business. Sure. And I think there's so many choices to make. There's so many things to do. There's so many things to look at. And I think people just they get so driven I just want to make money doing it that they don't maybe slow down and well, how am I actually accomplishing it? What are my actual numbers? People are just trying to eyes on the prize. They stop thinking about the steps it takes to get there. And so when it comes to profit and having control over your profit, what are some key things that I know you've been in business for, 300 years. 300.
So. I'm very close. I look super good for my age and clearly I am a vampire. So a couple things I just want to say. The point of owning a business on some level is to make a profit. That's part of the point. I mean, if you just wanted to make money, and I think, can we talk about two things here? Making money and making a profit. And can we talk about how those things are different? If you want to make money, you can go get a job and somebody will pay you money to show up. So
I can vouch for that.
Right. Yeah. Kayla, you get paid money to show up and do your job. Yes. And that's how most people think of it. That's the most common transaction that exists out there is, I need to make money, so I better go get a job. And I think there's something weird that gets wired in people's brains when they say, well, I'm going to start a business. And that means I'm going to show up somewhere and get paid. Just like a job, I show up and I get paid. A business is I show up and I get paid. But that's actually not quite how a business works. And I think that's a little funny. There was a buddy of mine, Sharon, who was mentioning something the other day, super interesting. He just caught my attention with it the other day. He said, people design a business that they have to work at all the time. And he said, what if you designed a business that you could work at or you didn't have to work at, but the business still made money for you? And I know that that's kind of oversimplification of something, but it really stood out to me because I'm the reason why, most people are I was an employee and I hated working for somebody else. So then I went off to work for myself because I hated who I used to work for. That happens very often. In Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, he talks about the entrepreneurial seizure, where at some point you either hate your boss or you're mad that they don't work enough. And so you're I'm going to do this myself. That's kind of what happens. And people wake up one day and say, I'm going to do this on my own because of whatever. And I think that happens in salons with this booth rental versus commission. I'm working for somebody else, but I hate the somebody else, or I really should just work for myself, or there's some embedded idea that one day they'll own a business. And then the easiest way for them to do that is to go rent a booth at a suite rental place, and they're out the door. So I'm bringing this up, and I know we're talking about profit, but I want to say this. You and I said this right before we started the show. At step number 10, you're trying to make a profit. But if you get step number 1 wrong, you can't manipulate anything or change anything at step number 10. So sometimes we have to go back to the very, very basics. And that's why I'm rewinding this on today's show. I'm rewinding all the way back to the basics of why do we go to work every day? Because if you're showing up at your salon every day to get paid, you already lost. Because you can't make a profit on your effort. That's impossible. Profit is not pay for effort. Profit is pay for risk. So let me talk about what I mean by that. As a business owner, the risk I took to open the business and risk to hire a bunch of people and have them show up and put something out there and hope magically that we can generate income and that you guys can all get paid and I get paid too. That's the risk, right? That's the risk that I took of starting a business. But when I show up, and even right now, when I'm showing up doing the podcast, I'm getting paid in some form or fashion for my effort, like an employee. This is me, Jason, acting as employee. If I buy a share in Coca-Cola, how many days do I have to show up to get paid from Coca-Cola? If I buy a share in Coca-Cola, how many days am I required to work at the Coca-Cola, the koala factory? I got my Australia trip on my mind. Right. How many days? If I buy a share in Coca-Cola and it makes profits, I get rewards from that. How many days on the job do I have to show up at Coca-Cola, Kayla?
Well, if you're just in a share, do you have to show or do you have to work there to have a share in it?
No, I just own a share.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I can just go buy a share in Coca-Cola and then I get paid part of the profits of Coca-Cola. They get paid back to me for 0 days on the job. So
nice.
let's talk about one. Well, I mean, it sounds nice, but like, Kayla, you could put $100 in a Coca-Cola stock, and over the course of the year, it could make $2.
That's true.
So you're like, sounds nice.
So good.
That $2 sounds amazing, and you're like, maybe. And by the way, $2 on $100 would actually be that'd be a decent return. Like, I know it sounds silly, but like you have to put like $1 million into Coca-Cola to make the income that you want to make. And most people are like, well, I don't have $1 million to go take a risk and then hopefully get a little bit reward. So we do a perceived easier thing, which is start a business, but then we promptly start a business and act like an employee. I'm the most important employee that works here. I'm going to put my name on the building. I'm the most important, like it's Jason Everett's salon. I'm going to be the most important employee here, and I'm going to do the most work and show everybody how to set a good example for us. I'm going to work harder than everybody. I'm going to do more hair than everybody. I'm going to do more services. I'm going to stay late and work longer. And then it's like, so now you went from being a regular employee to being a superstar employee. Now you're the superstar employee, and you can even get paid a little bit more than you could in your job, technically. But you're also working your face off, and now you have all the requirements of running a business, and you have to deal with your taxes and your finance and your accounting and like the banking, and you're like, this is crazy. And yes, you're making more money, but you're dealing with all these other problems. And usually in the first year, 2, 3, 5, this business, Kayla, for me, it was 3 years before I even got back to the same level of income I was making. 3 years. Could you imagine? Like, okay, whatever you're making now, lop that in half for the next 3 years. You're like, hell no, I don't want to do that. That does not sound fun. And I'm going to double your workload.
No, that doesn't
great.
Sound fun.
That doesn't sound super fun. So, and if you're listening to this podcast right now or watching it or whatever you're doing, you know what I mean. You've done that. And maybe it wasn't 3 years. Maybe I'm a slow learner. Maybe for you it was 3 months. I thought it was going to be 3 months. It ended up being 3 years, right? And so the reason why I bring that up is when you are an employee, you don't have to master your finances very well. You just have to know how much money do I spend and do I make a paycheck big enough to cover my expenses? That's kind of like the level you need to get to. Business owner level 1. And this is we have a roadmap inside the academy. As you know, Kayla, we have our High Performance Salon Academy roadmap. Like, what do you do to get from $0 a month as a salon owner to $25,000 a month as a salon owner? That's a big milestone. Your first $25,000. A lot of salons are like, how do I get to my first 10 grand? But a lot of them are like, well, hey, I'm a stylist. I can bring in 8 to 10 grand by myself of my own effort. So that's how I get to my first 10 grand. But now you have to bring in another person. You're like, I hope you're going to bring in 10 grand. Oh, great. 2 of us together. Kayla, you bring 10, I bring 10. Congratulations. We're at 20 grand. Oh, Yay. Crap. We have to bring in a third person. Hopefully they bring in 10 grand. Maybe that'll get us to our first amount. But now you want to do something different than I want to do. And we have whatever. And I got to take a risk. And like, it's all this chaos. So your first 25 grand, that's why I'm saying that's kind of like level 1 is business ownership. If you mess this up at level 1, you can never make a profit later. So let me talk about it. Is it okay if I now get into that?
Yes, please.
People are like, what the hell? Get to the point.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes I'm in like philosophy mode on this stuff, but this is really important in my mind. This is going to sound, as soon as I say this, everybody's going to say, oh, I already know that. But let me explain what you don't know about it at the level that I do or maybe at the level that I do. Maybe you understand more than I do. It's totally fine. I would hope that you do if you run a big business. You need to understand what your business's break even is. Now everybody's going to say, I know what my break even is. I need to bring in 20 grand a month or whatever. Okay, here's my definition of break even. Fixed expenses plus your variable expenses plus a 10% cushion. And that needs to be your fixed expenses. You will know because they're the monthly amounts that don't change. Your rent, your internet, your whatever else you pay for, right? Your water. Maybe the water goes up and down, so that'd be a variable. So fixed is like same price every single month payment. Your variable is all the things that go up and down, like your supply run to the local Salon Centric or whatever, Cosmoprof, wherever you go. That can go up and down depending. There's other things that go up and down. Your water could go up and down. Your power usage could go up and down in summer and whatever. So those would be variable expenses. So fixed plus variable plus a 10% cushion because I know you're going to screw up the math and you're going to have surprises. So put 10% in there just because. And that is where you start with your business break even. And if you don't know what that amount is, and people are like, oh yeah, I know. And then the next question I would ask is, when's the last time you updated it? And they're like 2 years ago. I'm like, well, it's not the same number anymore. I know you've signed up for more subscriptions and some softwares and some things. And like, you need to be updating it. Like I know mine every month, every single month. at 30 days, I know I just ask my accounting team, they do the report for me and they say, hey, Jason, here's a break even for every business that you have. Here's your cash position. Here's your break even. And here's what you need to do this month. I'm like, whoa, man, I started spending way more in that business or way less in that business, or I hired more employees or whatever. And I'm like, wow, the cash position of that business is now very different than it was a month ago. So I know every single month on average, not an idea about it. That's why I'm saying I'm calling people out on their mat. I don't want you to kind of know it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or $100,000. I want you to know exactly what it is.
Down to the penny.
Yeah, down to the penny. I would say down to the dollar. Down to the dollar.
Nice, smart.
Pennies are, pennies when you're doing it. But I'm just saying you should know it down to at least the dollar and have a pretty good idea of what does that look like. Because what happens is if you know it's $20,000 in the smallest salon example up to $25K, if you know it's $20,000 and you have a month where you only do 19, what happens? Well, that $1,000 comes right out of your pocket, or it comes out of your savings account, or you run on a credit card, and now that's the difference. So that basic level is this foundational premise for how you start to understand what your profit is. Because step 2 after your break even, and that's at level 1, is like getting that 25 grand a month. And you would be lucky to figure out, I don't expect salons to make a profit at 25 grand a month. So, and then people are like, what the hell, Jason? And you've heard me say this number a million times. I use it all the time. 7% of salons make a profit, 20% break even, and the rest are going broke. That 7% of salons are much larger salons. I really do believe that you are not making really a profit until you're at 25 to 50 grand a month, and really even 50 to 100 grand. That's where the profit starts to show up. So once you move from that 0 to 25 grand, you move into what's called, we call it profit first or profit simple. There's some very different ways you can do it. Mike Michalowicz, who's a homie of mine, wrote a book called Profit First. It's an amazing book. It changed my life, to be really honest. It changed how I thought about profit because I'll talk about it and give some definitions. Profit is your reward for taking the risk of business ownership, like a stock, okay? It's your reward for taking the risk. And employees make paychecks, business owners make profit. The problem is most people define business owner as the active act of running a business. So if I'm a business owner, that means I'm the active person. You go to a Subway restaurant down the street, the owner is working at that Subway. He or she is slinging sandwiches just like everybody else. You go to a pizza place, the owner's usually there. I was at a restaurant the other day, owner there. That's a owner operated business. They're making money as an employee. And so they're pretty happy and they can make good living, 100 grand a year, 150 grand a year, maybe 200 grand a year as the owner of a franchise. So they bought themselves a job though, versus profit means you don't have to be there and you still make money. So employees look for paychecks. Investors look for profit. As a business owner, you got to decide which way you're leaning towards. Are you leaning more towards the employee side or more towards the investor side? And what I'll say is in the beginning, your first 25 grand a month, probably towards the employee side. Even to your first 50 grand a month, probably more towards the employee side. But what starts to happen is you have to start adjusting your lean to get to the investor side. So when you're at $50,000 or $100,000 a month, you should be making some on the employee side and some on the investor side. Right? But a lot of businesses can make it to $100,000 a month, which would be the equivalent of $1.2 million a year. And they've never leaned over to the investor side. They're still very hardworking employees. And so just some profit numbers to give you, and for those of you guys that are a little savvier, like we would say at like the 25 to 50 grand, you're probably taking home 10% profit. Then at the 52, and by the way, I should rephrase that. It's not you're taking home 10% profit. 10% of your income should be coming from profit. At 50 to 100 grand, 40%, excuse me. I'm sorry. I take all that back. I was looking at the number over here and I got confused on which level. So forget what I said. Erase it out of your mind. Hear me on this. Is that at 25 to 50 grand, you should be making still no profit. At $50 to $100,000, you might start to sneak out that profit. And that would be 10% of your income should come from that. So like, let's say you're making $10,000 a month. As a number, that means 1,000 of that is coming from your salon's profit at that 50 to 100K. That's not very much profit. Like if you said, I'm going to run a business that does maybe $1 million to make $1,000 a month, that's probably not a good trade, right? You'd still say being an employee is better, right? I run $1 million business, I make $1,000 a month. Not so much,
right?
That's not enough to make your, to show up. So What really starts to happen is above 100K though, now all of a sudden you're making 20% profit. So maybe on that 10 grand, you're making $2,000 a month. That's starting to get a little bit better. But notice you still have to make your employee money to survive because nobody's living on $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month. So you're still actively in the business. But I want to rewind back to the very beginning of what I said, which is if you don't understand your break even at the very bottom, you can't start to adjust your profit on the way up. Because you don't understand your finances well enough to do it. And yes, that understands, getting management of your profit and loss statement, understanding that. And one other thing I want to say, and hopefully, I don't know if you're following me on this stuff, Kayla, or if I'm just ranting today, but this basic premise here is most people see, and this is why Mike Michalowicz is so brilliant, most people see profit as something that happens to them if they do their job right. It's the other way around. Profit is a function of you planning, and then it tells you what you should do in your business to achieve the profit that you want. It's not something like, did I do good? Let me check my P&L. And that's how most people operate their business. At the end of the year, they look at their P&L and they're like, did I make a profit? Yes or no? And then they look at their profit and it might say they did, but they're like, that money's not in my bank account. What the hell? So what we teach people is how to actually plan for the profit that you want at the size business that you're at. So you actually see it every single week hit your bank account and you know exactly what's in it. Like I just looked at my profit account. I know exactly how much is in that bank account. As of today, as of this morning, I know exactly where it's at and I have a plan for what to do with it. And if I choose to reinvest in the business, I can. Or if I choose to take it out, I also can as a business owner.
Ready to transform your business and improve your salon's profitability? With Lonza's 3-in-1 technology and intermixable shades, your hair color inventory is streamlined with limitless creativity behind the chair. Click the link below to unveil the secret to salon success.
Are you ready to increase your retention and revenue and convert website traffic to clients? Then you're ready for Maya. Maya creates better business relationships by pairing the right clients with the right beauty professionals. Use promo code HPSA for your first 2 months free. Visit joinmaya.com to get started.
We're Forest, born on the salon floor and built for and by hair and beauty professionals like you. Forest is your marketing, your reporting, your reputation management. You need one easy-to-use system that does it all. Forest, together we grow.
Okay. Yeah. So I love how you said, like, are you following? I think so. I know we're deep in it today. I know what I heard you saying is like being aware of where you're at from the very beginning of like starting from the, like going back from way out when you get to, you're just trying to make a profit, but you go back to like, what is your break even, knowing your numbers every step of the way. Yeah. And knowing like not just taking a profit because like, yeah, I'm hoping to making a profit, but be more intentional about like knowing where your numbers lie, knowing how much what your bills are. Mm-hmm. So you know how much you have to pay into those. And then I was curious before you had said not like up to $25,000 a month, you don't take a profit. Is that because at that level you're wanting to pour back into the business to grow your business? Like, is it like,
no, you don't have enough money to, there's no money. Like at under $25,000 a month, you have so many expenses. It's not like you're reinvesting. It's not like, oh, I have all this money. It's like, no, you're bleeding a freaking rock. There is nothing to take.
Got it.
Do you see what I'm saying? So like, let me just say, like if I make, let's do a quick math. If I'm bringing in $10,000 and that's all my effort and I have supplies and I have whatever, I'm probably burning. It might cost me $10,000 to run my business and I'm bringing in $10,000. So I have $10,000 in income coming in and I have $10,000 in expenses. Oh no, how do I make a profit? You don't. I don't even make a paycheck. And that's why I'm saying like the beginning stages of running a business is like your expenses and income are almost always the same. And so that's why I'm saying there's just not enough room for like, oh, well, let's plan to make that profit. It just doesn't work. The scale's not there yet. The only way to turn a massive profit is to scale your company. And so when people are like, I want to have just me and my friend Sally run the salon together and like, why can't I make a profit? I'm like, you and Sally are not profitable because you're not scalable. The reason why Amazon makes a profit is they're at scale. All these other businesses make a profit at scale. Some franchises, like a McDonald's franchise, if you don't know this, a McDonald's franchise, the average franchisee who owns a McDonald's, for their not on the job work, they could maybe make around $100,000. Like they own it, they run it, they manage it, they put millions of dollars into that McDonald's and $1 million cycles through that McDonald's. for them to make about $100,000 a year. Now you might go, cool. If you don't make $100,000, you're like, all right, $100,000 sounds amazing. Give me a McDonald's. But who the F wants to put $1 million of their money into something and do all this work and have all this headache and have all these employees that could sue you and do whatever and advertise and have millions of customers who roll through your door to make $100,000? You just go get a job and earn $100,000. It's a better deal. So most McDonald's owners, may not know this, the average McDonald's owner, it doesn't make sense for them until they own 5 or 10 McDonald's.
Wow.
So the average McDonald's owner owns 5 because now they're making $500,000 a year. And that makes sense to have that type of risk because $500,000, you're probably not going to make $500,000 as an employee, but you could make $500,000 if you happen to own 5 McDonald's.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective to take of like, yeah, well, we were just going to take on more. And it's like where you're wanting to make a certain amount of money. And if you're driven, like you said in the beginning, like if you're driven, like I just want to make a profit, you've already lost in terms of like, I'm just trying to get money and not thinking about what you're doing to be creative and making sure that you're taking the steps that are actually effective for your business and making sure that you are starting like not trying to take money or not trying to just hope at the end of the year that you are making that money,
right,
instead of being intentional about knowing exactly where you're at and what your strategy is to get there.
I would say that salons that are doing their first $500,000 are still in the struggle phase, trying to figure out how to stabilize and what they do. The reason why we push salons to get to their first $1 million is because that's when the business becomes viable, that you don't have to work there all the time in order to still make some money. Because prior to running $1 million salon, you own a job, you don't own a business.
Wow.
And I think that's a lot of, I feel like it's a downer show, right? People are like, oh no, because there's a lot of salons that like do $300,000 a year and they call me like, Jason, I want to make profit. I'm like, well, we've got to grow you. We got to grow everything. And they're like, what do you mean you got to grow everything? I'm like, you're not going to like, there's just not enough math in there to make it work. Like you can't do $300,000 a year in income and make $300,000 a year, or even if you make $100,000 a year. There's so many expenses that you have. And the expenses, like in an average salon, like they're lucky to make, like, let's just say this. Even if you looked at this scale, right, is that I'm doing some math on my phone here. Let's say a $300,000 a year salon times 0.05%, 5% salon, you might be able to make $15,000 in profit. I think that's not awesome. I wouldn't like to live on $15,000 a year. I couldn't pay for very much. That's barely a car payment, and maybe it's a little more a car payment, but I'm just saying, like, you can't live somewhere for that. You can't do anything for that. So if you're doing $300,000 a year, just enjoy the job that you have. And that's insulting-ish, but I'm saying it because I say it out of love to say, like, it's time for you to get growing, man. Is like, if you really want to run a business that can pay you $100,000 or $200,000, and this is what happens. They're like $300,000 a year. They might be making $50,000, $75,000, or $100,000 behind the chair in their job, but maybe $5,000 a year in profit. How do I make that profit grow? You got to grow. And that's where I go back to the basics, which is understanding your break even, understanding your finances. Because if you don't understand it when it's at its first infancy of your like 10, 15 grand a month, when it's $100,000 a month, you're really not going to understand it. And those holes are just bigger. Those $10 problems are now $100 problems. They're now $1,000 problems. They're now $10,000 problems. So you have to really master each of those levels as you go from that first 25. And that's kind of our stages in the academy, is like 25, then 50 grand, then $100,000 a month, then $100,000 plus a month. And then we try and figure out, how do we get you to $250,000 months? Those are very different businesses at $250,000 months. You run a $3-4 million a year business. And then, I haven't seen many salons that do it, but we have seen some salons that do up to $500,000 a month in multiple locations. But like, that's a very different business. And like, depending on what stage you're at, you need to get help. And I would just say, man, this is where you need to get help from somebody else, because some of the generic advice you receive online, and I'm just going to call myself out. This was generic advice today, kind of. I did give you advice based on levels, but if you didn't hear me right, or you said, oh, Jason said I have to do this, but you're listening to the advice for the wrong level, it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think it's, realizing where you're at. And even if like you are listening to this and you're just like, oh man, I am at a higher level, but I really still don't understand where I break even going back to like, then you need to go back to that and figure out what your break even is before you continue moving forward. So I know you mentioned, like, made a joke about it being like, downer episode. And if you're listening to this, you're like, man, it kind of is chaotic and I don't really know where my numbers are and I'm not sure. Then Jason, what can we tell those people of like, okay, so you through the understanding that you have today of like knowing your profit and loss, knowing where you break even, what your bills are and how much you're making, what direction can people take walking away from this episode today to where they can feel like they have a little bit more control over their profit, and like what are some action items that these people can have today?
What I would say is, again, starts with the break even, which is like oversimplification. It's kind of like saying, when you get in the car, do you know where the gas and the brake are? I mean, it's like, do you know the gas, brake, and steering wheel? And you're like, haha, like it seems super basic. But I look forward for a plan for how much profit I want to make based on how many employees I have and what's going on and what our expenses are and what office we're in. Like, there's a lot of pieces. There are literally 1,000 pieces that you have to monitor and manage inside your business to look at your finances and know what's going on. But the main drivers are income and expense. If I can control the amount of income by growing my sales, or I can control the expense by reducing my expense, I have more control over my profit. And the basic model from Mike Michalowicz, this is his, not mine, is the traditional accounting model is income minus expenses equals profit. I'll say it again, income minus expenses equals profit. And the way I teach it, and I learned from Mike, was it is income minus profit equals what you have left to spend, right? So I take my income, and I go, cool, we made, making a number, we made $100. Okay, great, we made $100. I'm going to take $10 out of that, right out the top, put that over here, and we have $90 left to run the business. Same scale, $100,000. I'm taking 10 grand off the top, putting that away, and then we have 90 grand to run the business. Because, Kayla, what I said earlier about, oh my God, my expenses and my income are blah, 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 like all these things, it's because we spend whatever's in the account. People become bank account cowboys, and they're like, if there's money, like, it's like in your bank account, you're like, oh, I have money, then I'll spend it. If I don't, I don't. You have to hide the money, profit. You have to hide part of that away, and then you can start to make a profit. And when you hide it right out the gate, you're hiding the take off the top. And so it is pure profit that you can hold, and you put it in an account, you hide it, and then you have to spend the rest of the month figuring out how I can only spend 90% of what I just lived on. Right? It's you steal it away first before you even see it, and then you will spend less. What most people do is they're like, well, I have to spend money on all this stuff. And I'm like, well, do you have to? Well, if you only had $90 to spend, guess what you'd spend? $90. But if you had $100 in your bank account, you'll think, and this is a psychological mind F, is that you have to get used to the psychology of having less. When you get used to the psychology of having less, profit becomes more abundant. And notice I didn't say, oh, I'm going to cut over here and I'm going to cut over there. I just am starting with less to spend. Because remember, when you started your business and you had 10 grand a month, you figured out a way to make it work. But then when it grew to 50 grand, you still figured out a way to make 50 grand work. And then you figured out a way to make 100 grand work. So you have to pull out this artificial stop and just see less of it, hide it somewhere, stash it somewhere, and do it. And what I'd recommend you do is pull out 1% to start and wait until you don't notice it. And then pull out 5, and then pull out 8, and then pull out 10. And a lot of salons sometimes can pull out 10%, sometimes up to 15. It depends. You're running pretty lean if you can pull out 15% as a salon. Other businesses are different. Every business is completely different. Coaching is very different than salons. Restaurants are minuscule. Grocery stores are minuscule. Some businesses are better than others. It just depends. High profitable businesses are very different. And it allows you to see kind of what the differences are.
Dang. Mm-hmm. Wow. But I know, like, yeah, talking about profit and like this is the side of business that's one, I know, like for a lot of you, it's like hard to wrap your mind around, and you like, we get a lot of questions and people just not understanding what their profit is, or not understanding like how do they make money, how do they grow, and they just kind of get stuck. And then when people come to the academy, they get like, yeah, like I'm just ready to fold in the towel. Like it's so confusing, it's too much for me. Mm-hmm. And what it like you get away from your passion, the reason why you started your business in the first place, because you're still wrapped up in like, well, I'm not making any money, and right. And sometimes it's a matter of your perspective of how you're looking at it, and where like going back to the basics of level one. Well,
and I would just say most people overcomplicate simple things. Your job should be to uncomplicate complicated things, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can make things really, really simple and just break it down and say, look, let me just look at your break even and see where that's at. And if you don't know how to calculate that, let's get the foundational piece in there, because adding zeros is actually not that complicated. I mean, and I don't mean like it's not hard to grow. It's easy to grow. I'm just saying, like, adding a couple more zeros, get in there. But like my son, he's in the 4th grade. Like, he can multiply hundreds, but he can't multiply thousands or 10,000. We're the same way. We got to figure out in the, numbers of commas that we have in our reality right now, what makes the most sense. And it's easy for a lot of people who have lots of commas are like, oh, I'm going to help you when you're small, but like it's not that different. You just have to look at it and get some help. And I would just highly encourage you to get some help and support. If you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, I just need way more help on profit, then get a coach, man. Get somebody who can help you with it. That's what our job is to help you, coach you and put you around other people who talk about money effortlessly and freely, and they are designed to help you. And that's what we do inside the Academy. I'd love to help people with that, because you deserve to have a mastery of this. You started a business. You don't deserve a job. You deserve a business. Let's help you make a profit.
Absolutely. And if you like, and it's okay to admit that like, this is just not my strong suit.
Totally.
And profit. And then that in those cases, it's like, yeah, well, do what you do best and running your salon, and hire somebody or get somebody in there who can help you look at your numbers and be like, hey, this is what you can do. Here's the monumental, or here's the things to do to be able to get to the place you want to be.
Yeah.
And if that's not your strong suit, it's okay to say that and to find somebody who's better at it than you are.
You got it.
That's amazing. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I hope you got a lot out of today's podcast and been able to just take a different perspective at your profit and how you can, or just your numbers and how you're growing your salon, even how you're looking at it. No matter what level you're at in your salon, however much money you're making a month, if you were feeling kind of like in a chokehold at the end of every month of like, man, my numbers are just not lining up, or I'm not making the amount of money that I thought I was going to be making at this point in my life, then get your support or look at your numbers and go back to level 1 and find your break even and start there. And if you want support, there's a number in the description. You can always reach out to us, and we would love to support you in your business, because this is what we love to do. We have a whole community of salon owners that come alongside each other and help grow and help find solutions to the things that you're struggling with in your salon. So if you want any support, that number will be in the description. I used to say the number, but if you're driving, I don't want you to
safety first, Kayla.
Safety first. Thank you so much, Jason. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast and just dive into the parts of business that are sometimes hard to talk about and hard to learn about and can be pain points for some. So hopefully you got a lot out of this podcast. And Jason, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Kayla. Great job.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time on the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast.
You've been listening to the Profitable Salon Owner Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and check us out at profitablesalon.com for more episodes, content, and to help you turn your salon into the business you've always dreamt of.